Hello and welcome to the Badger Cave. Unfortunately, Hannah Wallen is having a bit of technical difficulties, so she'll have to join us a little later on. But we have Sour Grape, and until Hannah joins us, we can always do a little bit of a conversation about what Sour's up to, the kind of projects she's in, and yeah, and about that kind of stuff. So why don't you give us a little bit of an intro to who you are, Sour, and what you do?
Well, I'm Sour Grape, and I have a YouTube channel, like everybody else on the internet. Um, I mostly talk about political stuff. I am an anti-feminist, not MRA yet, but I mostly talk about that, and I play art games. And if anybody knows what art games are, you really don't want to know about them. They're basically video games with a political spin on it. Like the worst of the, you thought Depression Quest was bad. You have never played The Serpent. Like they have the worst. There are some pretty bad games out there that get press, and I just showcase them and let's play them. So.
Well, okay, and I have a question. You also write for, believe.
Oh yeah, I'm now part of a group, Campfire Tales. So
Cool.
I now write for them, along with people Cerberus, if anybody knows, Pigeon, and yeah, it's been fun. We mostly talk about geek culture in a very, how shall I put this, non-PC manner. And we do streams, and they're pretty awesome.
So non-PC as opposed to you were mentioning another.
Yeah, it's like if anybody knows what Geek and Sundry is, they basically focus on geek culture. They are sort of PC in my eyes. I don't know about anybody else, but this is sort of the non-PC version of that.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
the reality is that political correctness really is just it's social posturing in my
And it's
opinion.
boring. Let's just put it that way.
It's boring and it's social posturing. It's setting yourself as a moral better. And the problem is that when you analyze it, it really isn't based on anything except exploiting minorities for
Pretty much.
morality. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so if you're interested in some geekery and geek reviews, and actually the way you described your channel, your YouTube channel, I almost want to watch it. To I assume you tear those games apart.
Oh, do I ever? Sarcastically, of course. They're all art. They get fives out of fives. I'm not a hateful person.
Every single game gets a 5
Every
out
single
of
game
5.
gets a 5 out of 5. Why would you say any less? They're art games. They're beautiful. They're just, the political message is out front. Why would you give them anything less?
They are what they are,
They
basically.
are beautiful, yes.
I'm assuming this is sarcasm.
It's one kind of chasm, yes.
Okay. As opposed to multiple kinds of chasm. Well, I see that Hannah has managed to resolve her issues. So, Hannah,
Yes.
Hannah, can you say hello?
Hello.
Oh, great. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Hannah, what you do and where you do it.
I get frustrated with Google not being able to find its own damn software on my computer in my living room. And I also blog a lot in my living room. Uh,
You do a
on
lot of things in your living room.
breakingtheglasses.blogspot.com. Fuck you, Google. And I'm a little frustrated with Google right now. It took me like 5 or 6 tries to get it to recognize that it had already installed software on my computer. And honeybadgerbrigade.com and a voice for men and gender addict and mensrights.ca. And if I've left anything out, it's because I'm frustrated with Google.
And you can find links to Sour and Hannah's various doings and sundry in the low bar of this YouTube video. And if this ends up on Libsyn, you're just out of luck. So screw you. So we're going to be joined probably later on this evening by my co-blogger, my former, well, not former co-blogger, but co-blog. Oh, God, I've just screwed this entirely up. Let me start all over again. We're going to be joined by Jim Doyle, who blogs at genderaddict.com. That's GenderRA, oh God, TIC, something like that. Gender Addict.
Yeah, yeah.
Close enough. It's in the YouTube low bar. That actually goes to a category on honey badgers now because we sort of folded it all into one. And yeah, he's a great guy. He's probably gonna have lots to say if he can manage to get on the show because sometimes he has a little trouble with stuff like that. But we will wait for him with bated breath. So Hannah, why don't you take it away with the summary of what's going on? And everybody who isn't talking, mute. So take it away, Hannah.
Okay, well, the basic thing is this started with a single accusation. Now, I didn't write anything up for this because I really didn't have a chance today, but there was one accuser, and she had several women decide to join her in her accusation. She was going for money, and that accusation was settled out of court for a payment. And after the payment, then other women began coming forward, and we now have, I guess there's now around 17 women who have accused Mr. Cosby of various manners of sexual harassment and sexual assault. Um, in the meantime, he has remained pretty much silent on his accusations. Um, And I've got some news stories on this open, but haven't been able to switch tabs to get to them.
Damn
But
Google.
yes, and actually, yeah, damn Google. So I can't even remember the name of his damn lawyer. But
Okay.
but his lawyer has actually referred to these as outdated and discredited, partly because previous some of the previous accusations have been addressed and have been discredited. There was the one particular accusation. He was accused of having fathered a daughter, and she tried to blackmail him, and then did a paternity test and everything, and discovered that she was not his daughter, and she ended up being convicted for that. Um, the whole thing really gained steam when another comedian accused him on stage, and there's been some stupidity over it. His PR staff thought it would be a fabulous idea to ask Twitter to meme Bill Cosby, and there were some particularly scathing memes that came out of that. Things like "I like pudding pops and rape" and stuff like that. But I think the first accusation here was her name was Constant. A staffer at women's basketball team at Temple University, and there's according to CNN, actually it's 13 accusers. The mention I've seen of 17 was not Cosby; that was Bill Clinton. But I actually I discussed this a bit in an article on the Honey Badger Brigade. My particular interest in this has been the media coverage, not so much the accusations themselves, which for the most part are of behavior that you really can't document and prove this far after it has occurred. I mean, if he's guilty of the things he's accused, the majority of his accusations involve using chemical substances together and having sex afterwards, which isn't necessarily rape. And now some of the accusers are accusing him of drugging them without their consent by putting it in drinks and such. Now that if he's guilty of that, that is rape. But I have to point out that in was in the 90s there were a few experiments where they actually tested to see if women who a high percentage of women and girls who believe themselves to be drugged actually were. And there were a couple of police departments that ran studies on this and discovered that no, most of the time it's just that you drank too much or you underestimated your ability to handle a small amount of alcohol. and actually were not drugged at all, simply drank too much. But again, there's no way to go back and prove yes or no. Did Mr. Cosby do these things or did he not? Yet the media, in this particular case, is addressing the accusations as factual stories. They're calling them allegations, and they're talking about the women as accusers. But when they talk about Mr. Cosby, they're talking about him as a guilty man. And even more so, we have, feminists and other prominent women coming forward to say that specifically because there has been a lot of accusations, that they must be true. And that's Nancy Grace in particular tweeted out, "How many women are we to disbelieve? Are they all lying? And is Bill Cosby the only one telling the truth?" And my personal take on that is, why didn't that question get asked when Bill Clinton was accused? Because, in all honesty, the same people, the same ideological groups that are now, well, basically lynching Mr. Cosby's reputation, had exactly the opposite response when Bill Clinton was accused. In fact, they not only disbelieved the accusers, they went after the accusers with reputation-destroying criticism. Um, there were character assassinations, there was slut-shaming, there was classism. They referred to Clinton's accusations. They referred to the accusers themselves as bimbo eruptions each time a new one came out. There was James Carville's statement, "Drag $100 bill through a trailer park, you never know what you'll find." That was stated after Paula Jones's accusations came out, but he later claimed that it was a reference to Jennifer Flowers, who was Bill Clinton's mistress, as if, saying that about her made it better that he said it. And all of this stuff, this was all tolerated. The National Organization for Women never came out and said, "Gosh, you guys are victim blaming. You can't say this about these women. This is terrible. Shame on you. What the hell is wrong with you?" None of that. Not a word. And eventually, they even came out with a statement that they were not going to support Paula Jones because Republicans were supporting her. So this was a pretty clear-cut case of not only the media, but the political ideologues who generally present themselves as the defenders of women, um, rallying around a man accused of sexual predation. And his accusations were actually more, I don't want to say they were more credible, but they were less incredible than the accusations about Bill Cosby. Um, there were a couple of accusers that had medical records indicating that they had had injuries. There was physical evidence of the affair with Monica Lewinsky. Granted, there was, the discussion that should have been had that really wasn't had at the time very much was the fact that a consensual relationship with Monica Lewinsky doesn't prove anything except that he had consensual relationships. It doesn't demonstrate any predation. But compare that to the media response to Mr. Cosby, and you get this complete and utter turnabout. And it's the same kind of turnabout that happened between the Clinton case and the Clarence Thomas case. Back in the 90s, the first President Bush nominated Judge Clarence Thomas for the Supreme Court. And immediately, Anita Hill came out and accused him of sexual harassment. And that particular story it didn't have little evidence. It had zero evidence. There was nothing except her word. And that was treated as credible to the point where feminists today laud her as some sort of feminist icon and this, symbol of all sexually harassed women in the United States. And it's pretty obvious the pattern that you have here. Clinton was a left-wing Democrat, and he supported the causes that the National Organization for Women support, and he supported the causes that the establishment media wants politicians to support. He established or supported certain aspects of big government, and so they gave him an easy ride. And whereas Clarence Thomas, they figured he was going to be a diehard conservative, and that he was going to attack some of the causes that they supported, and so they went after him tooth and nail. Well, here you have Bill Cosby. He's not a politician. He hasn't run for office. He's not in charge of anything. He doesn't even run a business that you could say supports politicians. So you kind of got to wonder what the angle is here. Why are they going after Mr. Cosby? Well, I started looking into it, and he is a moral leader. He is not a politician, but he has been doing public speaking on, particularly to the black community, on conservatism. And his narrative, his I guess you could say his shtick, in as far as his political ideology goes, is pro-family. You could call him, MRAs would probably call him a traditionalist. He's really more about self-reliance. He's about building yourself, making your own success, depending on yourself, and being dependable for other people. And his speech targets men, young men, old men. And the idea behind his speech is for men to build a stronger male community. And his goal seems to be in persuading men within the black community to return to a more family-oriented focus, raising their boys, teaching their boys to be adults when they grow up, and teaching them to be self-reliant, teaching them to make wise choices and things like that. And whether you agree with everything that he says, or anything that he says, or none of what he says, he's gotten a discussion going about this, and he's really galvanized the black conservative movement. And I think that is why the media is attacking him. I don't think they're attacking him because they think he's guilty of sexually assaulting a bunch of women, because I don't think the media didn't think Bill Clinton was guilty of sexually assaulting any women. I think the entire reason the media gets behind or denies sexual assault allegations against a man with any level of power or any level of influence is entirely dependent on which side of the political fence is going to benefit from what he does, and which side of the political fence is going to benefit from bringing him down. What it really goes to show is that if you want to destroy a man, if you want to silence a man and prevent him from having influence on society and on your community or his community, you throw damsels at him. And that's what's going on here with Cosby. Now, that's not to say that I have an opinion, a specific opinion, on whether Mr. Cosby is innocent or guilty. So there's not really enough factual evidence that has come out about this case. There's not really enough solid anything that you can look at and say, well, that proves this or that proves that. There's mostly just a bunch of hearsay and innuendo. Even the latest thing that has come out is the actor that worked with him, who is now saying that he paid women, doesn't actually have anything that is concrete proof that associates Mr. Cosby with what he's accusing, or that associates sexual assault with what he's accusing. All he's done is demonstrate the money was given to some women, and it has his own name on it. So here we are looking at a situation where there's a lot of allegations, not really any evidence, a media blitz that's treating these women like stars, like being like accusing sexual assault or sexual harassment makes them stars, and a history of media response to sexual misconduct allegations that pretty clearly demonstrates that it's not the nature of the allegations or the seriousness or even the believability of the allegations that determines exactly what they do as far as a response related to those allegations. So that's the basic situation. I don't know. Have at it, guys.
Yeah. Thank you for that extensive overview. And to anybody who's listening, if you want to read Hannah's article, it's up at the blog at honeybadgerbrigade.com. The link will be in the low bar. For the podcast listeners, it's at honeybadgerbrigade.com. If you look for a word from a nerd in the sidebar to the right, you should be able to find Hannah Wallen's word from a nerd, and it'll be in that underneath that once it's out of the alpha feature, which yeah. So just look.
The title of it's "What Was the Question?"
Yeah.
It's kind of reference to Nancy Grace's question. But
Right.
yeah.
Okay, I'm going to invite Sour. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Ooh, do I ever? Now, for anyone listening out there, I'm just a wannabe comedian, so that's how I'm going to come at this problem. I've been involved with stand-up before when I was in college. It was wonderful. It was the best time of my life. I don't even know why I don't do it now. I'm lazy as hell anyway. But I study comics, and at this point, I don't understand why this happened to Cosby now. He was going to do a special with NBC. They scrapped it. He was going to do a Netflix special. They scrapped that. So you're sitting here and you're going, well, I mean, at some points, Hannah, I agree with you. It could be a political thing. Like this does have that feeling of political underpinnings and that sort. But in some ways, I'm going to have to disagree with you. And my reason is this. We've seen this before in comedy. For anybody who understands comedy, there's cartels. Like there are groups within networks of comedy that basically you owe your fame to. So Cosby, in my mind, I see him working for a cartel that is, we'll just call it NBC. So he owes basically his fame to NBC. Cosby, regardless of whether he did it or didn't do it, to me, it's going to be a he said, she said. That's up to the courts and everything. But when I look at this, has this actually happened before? Have we seen comedians who are part of that NBC group get pretty much slammed? Yes, we have before. Tracy Morgan. Tracy Morgan did a joke about his son being gay. Like if his son was gay, he would do X, Y, and Z, and it was for lack of a better word, heinous and ill. But that's who he was. That's who Tracy Morgan was. They knew exactly who Tracy Morgan was when they signed him for 30 Rock. Now you mentioned there was a guy who talked about Bill Cosby. This very same guy, Hannibal, I believe his name is, I can't remember his name at the moment, Hannibal Buress. That's his name. And I've seen his stand-up before. He's an okay guy. He wrote for 30 Rock. He wrote for NBC. I am not surprised that this low-level hack, in my personal opinion, said some stuff about a legend, Bill Cosby. He talked about Bill Cosby. Like in the hierarchy of comics, that doesn't happen quite often. So that's why you're going to see it in all these little, specials and things of that sort. They don't say things like that. Another comedian, Daniel Tosh. Daniel Tosh got in trouble. He was working for Comedy Central. He had to apologize. All of these people had to apologize for something that they said. And it's the same networks, it's the same ideology, it's the same idea over and over and over again. that you owe us something. We know who you are. You owe. We're gonna knock on your door. We're gonna be like, hey, Bill Cosby, we set you up with this special. We set you up with this show. You're gonna owe. He didn't give. I don't really think it has, and that's the only contention I have. I don't really think it's a political thing per se. I think it has everything to do with the fact that he owes and he didn't pay. And now he's going to be left with his career basically slandered.
Okay, let me, if you don't mind, Sarah, I'd like to just get a clarification. So you believe
Fine.
that, just a clarification on what you've said. So you think that the real issue is that there's a cartel in gaming that expects a certain type of payment from Bill Cosby?
There's a cartel in it's that's a lack of it. There's corporations, and there's different kinds of corporations in comedy. There's a corporation, for lack of a better word, that's it's run by Jewish people, and they don't like if you're a comic and you want to get involved with Hollywood, you have to go to the parties. You have to go visit people. You have to go to LA. You have to do all those things. When you're in certain, but that just depends on the different groups or cartels that you're in. And once you're in it, you owe. So in my mind, Bill Cosby owed something and he did not. I mean, look at this. There is no way in my mind that a low-level comedian like Hannibal Buress would have said that at all. Like, there's a hierarchy in comics. I'm not going to say anything about Louis C.K. I'm not, like, that's not what I do. So this Hannibal Buress works for the same people that just slammed Bill Cosby.
Well, the question is, what did he owe that he didn't pay?
At this point, it doesn't matter. It's gone. Like,
yeah, but it matters in that it's the trigger for all of this, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, what do you think he failed to give them?
I don't necessarily know that, but I mean, they know who you are. Like, they knew, and I agree with you, they know Bill Cosby is a black conservative. So why is it now, all of a sudden, they just go, no? And people already have known that these rape allegations existed in 1980 something, like in 1982. And some woman got paid basically out of court. So
Right.
my question is, how much does it take me to buy your integrity? Like, they already bought her integrity, and now she comes back and says, well, I want to talk about this. You don't have any right to. I bought you.
Well, the thing is, his conservatism has never been what it is today. In the past, he's done very subtle things with it. It's been, little bits here and there in his shows, things that have been, they haven't been overt, influential things. Now he's overtly influential. Now he is actually, has been doing public speaking. And he's been doing a lot of public speaking in closed sessions where the media, including CNN, is not invited. It's just him and his listeners, and mainly men. And I think that might actually be the thing that he did not give. Is not necessarily not the invitation, but the fact that CNN has its own. They have their own political affiliation as well, and it might be that they may have asked him to stop doing this, or they may have simply done this because of his influence, because of his increased influence and his change in tactics.
Possibly, but in my mind, they already know how he is. Like, they know how these people really are. They don't like it. Like, they already don't like it. They want you to be you, but not you. Like a toned down version of you. So now I'm sitting here from not a political science perspective, because that's what I study, but from a comedian's perspective, I'm looking at this and going, how much money does it take me not to owe them? Like, how famous do you need to be not to owe? And I don't know the answer for that. I don't know how this these allegations even sprung up. Like, this was already known beforehand. It doesn't make any sense.
I think I could answer that question. I don't think there is any level of money or fame that you can have
Exactly.
that will protect you from this. The reality is, the higher up in the hierarchy you go, the harder you hit when you fall.
Yep.
And that's and these people, these individuals, I don't want to say these people, but the individuals who seem to be motivated by this desire for ideological purity, they can get at anyone, and
Yep.
they can destroy anyone. And the reality is that the higher you build yourself up in the hierarchy, it just makes the fall the weapon,
Yep.
really.
You're right. And in comedians, I mean, it's so hard. There's so many comedians out there, and it's so hard to get your foot in the door. And when you get in, you're like, oh, this is great. I'm part of NBC. I'm part of 30 Rock. I say one gay son joke, and it's over. And it's almost over, but I have to apologize. And I'm wondering if they're coming up to Bill at this moment and going, well, you need to make a statement right now. And if you don't make a statement right now, you're done. I don't know. Even people like Tina Fey, if we go back and look at Tracy Morgan's situation, she distanced herself from him. So it's like even the people that are around you look at you in a different way. I wonder if the people around Cosby are just looking at him in a different way as well when they know who he is as a person. It confuses me.
Well, the reality is that it's an exercise of power. I think a lot
Yep.
of people get confused because they think of it as they're actually. I don't know if there's some of these individuals who want to use this outrage to essentially control the speech of others. If there's some of these people who actually sincerely believe what they're saying, that's fine. The result is the same: is that they're bullying people into silence. And the confusion is that people mistake this as a form of a moral. It's not a moral
Yep.
situation. It's not. If it was a moral situation, you could sit people down and explain it rationally. And for the most part, if they're not completely emotionally wedded to their ideas, you would start to get an understanding. You would come to an understanding, because really rationality, a rational discussion, a logical discussion, is an acknowledgement that the people that you're disagreeing with might have a point. I mean, when you engage in a rational discussion, by definition, you're saying that you're open to being changed. You're open to your point of view being changed. It's rational and logical discussion is a very egalitarian way of coming to a consensus, and it's entirely based on whether or not you can persuade someone through drawing logical steps that everyone like everybody can see and follow. And to disregard that and to say that I'm going to purely make my decisions based on emotionality, I'm going to say that rationality is a tool of oppression. Only tyrants say that, and only people with the ability to emotionally strong arm others say that kind of stuff. Because everybody else is every underclass throughout history only really had reason as a weapon in trying to get their will, to bring their will forward, because they didn't have any other power. I mean, maybe subterfuge or manipulation, but for the most part, it was reason and logic, and they had to appeal, and that's what reason, logical argument is. It's an appeal to everybody who's listening. It's saying, I'm not necessarily correct, but let me show you how I might be, how I might persuade you that I'm correct. And they don't want to do that because they are correct as far as they're concerned. They don't want to be seen to be in the position that they have to persuade you, because that would be acknowledging you as a human being. If you don't automatically already agree with them, they're obviously not really human. And so there's no logic to that except the desire to control the narrative and not allow the idea that it can be wrong. And I don't know if I actually addressed that point or just went really on a tangent, but I'll stop wittering. Did you want to say anything, Sour, or I'll actually bring on Brian?
No, bring on Brian. Yes,
Okay,
that
so
sounds pretty interesting.
people actually were asking in the chat room who was the little dog who was lurking, and that is actually Brian.
Is my buddy Brian. Oh
Yeah,
snap.
he's currently the producer of the Nerdcast on Honey Badger Radio, and he also does Good Guy Comic, which I believe is at goodguy.com. Is that correct, Brian? Oh, he's struggling with the mute button. I can see him struggling.
Okay, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, my mouse is weird. It's like double clicking for no reason. It's my website currently is at goodguycomic.weebly.com, but in like a few days it's going to be full on goodguycomic.com. Because I'm getting a new website with forums and the whole 9 yards. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, it's a great. Well, don't wait before you continue. I'm just going to give you a little plug because you didn't get an intro. It's a great comic. A Good Guy is about a romance from a man's perspective, and it is a good it's a good comic. So if you want a good read and something that doesn't if you're inclined towards the men's issues spectrum or the non-politically correct spectrum, you probably won't have to read it with the poised to tear your hair out. So go take a look at it. It's good. Once again, that's no. What was it again, Brian?
It's goodguycomic.weebly.com right now, and it will be goodguycomic.com in about a week.
Okay.
I'm going to be changing the domain and stuff. So.
Oh, great. So you have something to say about this situation as well. So
yeah.
Go right into it.
Yeah, I was trying to stay. I was quiet because I'm actually currently finishing up the next page for Good Guy, but I wanted to listen to the stream. So, and I actually think that a lot of what you guys are saying, I agree with most of what everyone is saying. I think that actually it lines up more than than at first blush, because I think that what Sauer's talking about, where there is, it seems as though with patterns with NBC and stuff in the past, that there's some kind of potential, like collusion, is for lack of a better word, going on. And of course, we've seen this happen with media, in like other places. Gamergate most recently comes to mind. And I wouldn't be surprised, because I did see, we talked about what had happened in other examples with Tosh and stuff. And what Hannah's talking about makes a lot of sense too, and I think that they actually kind of line up, because one of the things that I find, that the thing that I wanted to add that I think is that stood out the most for me, was when Bill Cosby was at his height, was when he was doing the Cosby Show in the late 80s and early 90s, I believe, or it was throughout the 90s. And it was a positive show about, basically it was like about a family, an American family, and it was a bit like on the hard to believe side. Like, they were very idealized. I mean, it was a doctor marries a lawyer, and they have a big house, and they have all these kids and everything. But there was it was larger than life, but it was a positive message. And while it was a story focused on a black family, the show appealed to everyone. Like, it didn't create the narrative in such a way that made anybody feel excluded. So that was one of the reasons why it was probably the most successful family programming of that time period. It was, for sure, like, period, and he actually included a lot of personal things that happened in his life with his marriage in the show. Like, his oldest son, Enos, for example, in real life, had a lot of trouble in school, and him and his wife, Camille, didn't know what to do. So at one point, they took him to a doctor, and they found out that he was dyslexic. And to reflect that, actually on the show, I guess they wrote it in that his son on the show, the character, turned out to be dyslexic, because he was kind of, he was a little bit of a dopey son that was more on the athletic side, while like, he was just sort of that kind of character. So he wrote it in that he was dyslexic, and then when they found out about that, they addressed it, and his grades went up, and they all sort of went off to be successful. And a lot of the stuff that that was great about the Cosby Show was he actually included a great deal of positive African American influences. Like, all of the sweaters were African made. Like they were like, that's where they were made. That's why we call it the Cosby sweater. But he was doing that on purpose. He had a lot of African art in the house and all that. But again, it was done in a way that it still appealed to anyone. It didn't. It wasn't meant to be exclusionary. It was meant to be inclusive. It was meant to send a positive message. It was so good that it actually made a spin-off called A Different World, which is about like the eldest daughter goes to college and like it's like this black college and all that. And he was the last positive father figure in a television show. Like, I mean, after that, they were like, and I don't know if it was because like the tides were shifting or what, but for whatever reason, he was like the last positive father figure on television. And then we went into like these sort of like Married with Children type dads, and where they became more and more oafish and stupid and like and so on. And that was what television was for the longest time. And where it gets really interesting is now Cosby wants to come back to TV after he's done all the speaking and like he's talked to the community and he's tried to like I think that Hannah's dead on. She says he's bringing forth the conservatism. But intentionally to focus on things like family and community and like probably church. I think he went and spoke at a few churches because there's a lot of that. Yeah, there's a lot of that in the community, and that basically his goal was to try to repair the damage. And he was that was his approach. And of course, people say he's getting crotchety in his old age. I don't think that's really so much the case. I think it's more like he's feeling the freedom to be more honest because he wasn't as much a public figure at the time. And I think that when you get older, you just give less fucks about like what you feel. So, he was very vocal, and of course he was actually kind of a divisive figure within the African American community, because of that. But one of the things that he wanted to do was, again, I think he wanted to lead by example because I saw a lot of positive. I live in and I grew up in a largely African American community, and I saw a lot of there was a lot of positive influence that came out of like his time. I'm not saying he did it, but around that time, the hip hop was different, the television was different, and it was very inclusive in that way, and like it was very cool. And I think that he thought he could come back and sort of bring that back, maybe, but and I think that the timing of it is this: he wants to come back, he wanted to do a show, and it was specifically the articles I read about him specifically stated that he wanted to do a show with that's sort of centered around a patriarchal figure, so basically a father figure. And I think that perhaps the cartel was part of it. I don't know, because I don't know what their values are. We're talking about like that's sort of like what I wonder, because Sauer mentioned Tina Fey, and we know Tina Fey is a feminist, so we don't know if her values are the ones that happen to also be shared by the people within the group that she works for, or and Cosby's sort of coming in and he wants to be against that grain. But I find that the timing of it is just too suspicious in that he wants to come back and do the TV show about a father figure, and that's the thing that sort of like spurred on all of this. Not only the accusations, which of course there could be any number of reasons for it. They could be true and maybe no justice was done. They could be false and someone's looking for a payday. Or the more obvious thing is the accusation alone will be enough to ruin his career, which we know that's all you need these days. If you just make an accusation of anyone, you can ruin them. You don't have to prove it. You don't need anything else. You can they'll stay away. Suddenly he becomes poisonous. It's like hot potato. They don't want to touch it. And that's almost all you need to do. And the more that this mounts and the way that the media treats it just makes it that much more toxic. And then people stop caring about whether it's real or not, and they forget that he wanted to do a show and a television special, and that he wanted to like try to make things better in some way, and it becomes more about the controversy and like, did he do it? I think he did it, and so on. And then people forget, they become distracted, they become emotionally engaged, and that's I think that I think that's basically what I think is happening. I think the timing of it, about him trying to bring back positive father figures to television, is what spurred this on. If it isn't the entire reason, it's definitely a factor. That's it. That's all I got.
No, I like that. I just have some disagreements, and it's just like weird disagreements, but disagreements nonetheless. But first, I'm gonna just say that I don't know for sure why. It could have been the moral reason you're talking about, that he does do specials, or does do speaking arrangements and stuff like that. But are you saying that they didn't know that he was like that this entire time? I find it sort of hard to believe that they didn't know
No,
who he was and signed, because they said they had the show ready. They had that Netflix special ready.
right. Well, I think that they knew, and well, here's the thing about Netflix. What I think Netflix didn't know, likely, because I don't know who owns Netflix, so I haven't done.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if NBC owns them or if they're their own. I imagine that they're their own
Put your
entity.
tinfoil hat on.
Yeah, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to. Silver String Media did all of it. That's what I'm saying. No, I'm not saying that. But I think that the NBC, if they were going to run a show or do something for him, they probably knew, and maybe he was approached, like you say, and NBC thought that they could, like, perhaps, like you were saying, neuter him in some way, or kind of control his message, or maybe they were like, well, we'll let you have your show, but let's bring on this wonderful wife that's going to be,
Okay, fair enough.
and all that, maybe. And he was like, no, I'm not doing that. And then they brought out the right allegations, and even though, like, Netflix might know what his values are, but they might not be invested politically in any of that, and they're more like, well, I don't care what we air as long as people fucking tune
yes,
in.
and I agree with that. I actually think that it's not necessarily a political issue, and this is coming from a political scientist, so just throwing that out there, but it's not a political issue per se, but it is an issue of who is their audience, who is NBC's audience, what are they going to like? They want money. That's it. That's all NBC and all these groups or cartels or whatever we want to call them. That's what they want.
Let's look at NBC for just a second.
Okay.
What is one of the largest and most leftist news sources on media right now? Like, what is the most far left, crazy ass?
MSNBC.
That would be MSNBC.
MSNBC.
Right. So
yeah, you have to put the P in front of it. They deserve it.
I'm not, again, I'm just saying that NBC may have interests counter.
Yeah.
Now the only question becomes is if NBC, if they were like, if their values lined up with MSNBC in the same way that Fox News lines up with like their television shows or whatever.
Of course, but they're catering to an audience. Like, the audience
I don't think
chooses
they
what
are.
they want to watch. Really?
They're not. They don't give a rat's ass about their audience. You're looking at the hippie generation. See, I don't think this is an ethnic thing at all. I don't know that this is necessarily a cartel thing in the way that you're thinking it is. This is the hippie generation. These are the people that wanted to make a difference, and they are the original social justice warriors. And they honestly believe, and I'm sure of this, they honestly believe that they can transfer their values, their beliefs to the general public by putting them into television. And I agree with Brian in one thing. I think they probably approached him and they probably said, well, you need to put this and you need to put that in your program, because they're doing it with all of their other programming. If you look at the majority of other television programming, and some of the newest programming that's come out, and this isn't NBC that's doing this, but the Fosters, that series is designed to normalize anything except the traditional or the nuclear family.
So
now,
you don't
whether
think
the
there's an
traditional or
audience?
nuclear family is a good thing or a bad thing
Yeah.
doesn't matter. I think that this is an effort to take the story and use the story to control the audience's opinions.
Really?
Yes, and I think that it has less to do necessarily with the programming itself and and more to do with his activities outside the programming, because while the programming and everything has been around for years. I mean, if you go back to the Fat Albert series, that was all family value stuff too. Although it was done in a time period when that was commonly acceptable. Um, his more recent activities, his more recent public speaking and everything, that has actually set fire to some people. I mean, that's been really, people have gotten really pissy over that. You look up the Wikipedia article on the pound cake speech, and then go through and actually read the stories that are linked. The Wikipedia article presents it in a different manner than the stories that it's linked to. And of course, that's a whole other show. We could do a whole show on the ideological bias of Wikipedia. But
Maybe
this
we
is a
will.
situation. Maybe we ought to. This is a situation where he has pissed off a lot of people. So there's two different groups that want to claim control of the black voter. And you have the Al Sharptons, you have the major social justice warriors, you have, those folks want to keep the black community invested in government programs to support their families. And then you have people who want to see the more independent community, the more interdependent community, where it goes back to a time when families were dependent on themselves and they were dependent on their neighbors for assistance, and they worked together to build their neighborhood up. And block party didn't mean everybody got high and shot at each other. It meant everybody got together and maybe helped fix up somebody's house, or everybody just got together and had a barbecue and a good time. And there's actually kind of a war going on for the loyalty and the lifestyle choices of the black community. You keep saying community like there's not an entire nation of various black people, but of the black population. And I think Cosby stepped in it. And I don't think he realized how hateful people were going to get towards him for taking a side in that. And you've got the establishment. Is the establishment aspect of this is more going to be more for the government program end, because that's where they make their money. They're taking a lot of money advocating for government programs, working for various agencies from government programs. Politicians get elected based on those government programs. There is an entire economy based on those government programs. And of course, in media, if you have a set of people that's invested in the elitist political ideology of the establishment, they are absolutely not going to be okay with supporting a comedian who has started to galvanize a movement to get away from those social programs, and it has become quite galvanized. And honestly, it strikes me as rather suspicious that this happened right after an election where the Democrats just had their asses handed to them, and they probably felt like they were owed that election. And I'm sure that there was a change in voting patterns, at least a slight change in voting patterns, that can be attributed to Mr. Cosby speaking. And that may have been particularly upsetting to the establishment media. And it's not just the media that he's involved with that is reporting on this in the fashion that I've been talking about. It's across the board. All of the establishment press is attacking him as though he is guilty. All of them. The ones that are in competition with the media organizations that he's involved with, and the ones that are in concert with the media organizations that he's involved with. Even the right-wing establishment media is not being all that nice to Mr. Cosby. So we're looking at a situation where it's it can't just be attributed to him owing his associates or his employers or his benefactors, especially since they have more to gain from him than he from them. It has to be something that explains the across-the-board attack.
Jump in, Sour.
Oh, yeah, I just got 2 points to make on that, and I don't necessarily disagree with you, but first point I'd like to make is when I had to study political psychology, I looked into different shows people watched and if there was a correlation between the different shows the audience watched and their political leanings. And yes, there is. So I don't I don't know if it was necessarily the network that was upset or the audience that was upset because, there's an audience out there for certain specific stuff on NBC. There's an audience out there for Modern Family. I don't watch it, but there is an audience out there. And I think they were looking at the show and they probably asked him to do something he didn't want to do, and he owes them his fame. Second, you mentioned, and I got a little confused here, you mentioned people were mad. What if the audience was mad? Like, do we know specifically what? We don't know specifically what people.
Well, yeah, the people that were mad were not necessarily, the low level. He's had some criticism from people who call themselves civil rights leaders.
They watch NBC.
For particularly for saying things like, pull up your pants, don't steal, things that pretty much, if you start pointing out that young people are doing these things in any given community, that given community is going to turn around and saying, hey, you're disparaging our community. And like I said, whether you agree with everything he said or not, these are things that are going to influence the response that he gets from the media.
All right, fair enough.
So, and whether they're part of the audience or not, one guy does not influence the network as an audience. They would have had to have had letters and letters and letters to get a feel for what the audience
actually
wanted
they would have had to get one woman saying your shirt sucks. That's what it takes. Nowadays they just need Twitter. They'll just tweet that honestly, and they'll get it done.
I don't think it's a network that affected the response to your shirt sucks. That was a lot of that was the man himself. He's the one that decided to apologize there. I think he was kind of blindsided by that. But that's a totally different discussion too.
Yeah, I get it.
The thing is, what we're looking at is a response that is too broad to be attributed to just one network and one network making decisions. And if you look at the various networks and the patterns of behavior of the networks, what you're seeing there is an attempt to influence public opinion in very subtle ways. And I mean, you're looking at the very people, the social justice warrior elite, the establishment elite. These are the people who have accused entertainment media of having that kind of influence. Violent games cause violence. Violent games cause misogyny. Violent music causes misogyny. Violent rap causes rape. They have said these things in the past. They believe these things. So it is pretty obvious that they're poised to try to use their programming as a form of mind control, whether it's complete mind control or subtle mind control that just has little nudges here and there. And I'm sure that the involvement of Mr. Cosby in politics doesn't go along the grain of what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and I unfortunately we're at the end of the hour. Thank you, Hannah, for your insights. Thank you, Sour, for your insights. Thank you, Brian Martinez, for your insights.
Yeah, this sounds like there should be a part 2. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
there probably should.
Maybe there should be a part 2, but we can discuss that in our secret badger cave. So, but anyway, thank you.
We have to have part 2. Your co-blogger didn't get to come in.
No, yeah. Well, we will definitely look into the logistics of a part 2 to be announced. But yeah, thanks again for coming on. I think there were some great points made. I'm glad to end on a high note and a lot of interesting stuff to think about. Um, just to do some of the business of the show, we are still have a very few number of those Karen Strawn, otherwise known as Girl Writes What, Rides a Bomb t-shirts. If you're interested in one, there's a link in the low bar of the YouTube channel. If you're listening to this through the podcast, you're probably out of luck, but you can go to our website and poke around until you find it. Good luck with that. We don't like to make things easy because that's just the way we are. But anyway, thank you to our listeners, and yeah, thanks again to the people who joined up and had a discussion on this. Thanks, and good night.